Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. I am your host, Austin Render. It is Tuesday, December 31st. Happy early New Year to all of those listening, whether you're joining us live on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, where we are every Tuesday at noon Eastern time, or you're watching us maybe on the YouTube channel after the fact. Maybe you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify. However you are consuming our product, we appreciate you for listening or watching or doing both. Hit that subscribe button, download our episodes, give us a rating. That kind of stuff really helps us as we continue to improve our product here in year one of the Dribble Drive. If you are joining us live on the YouTube channel, feel free to drop your questions and comments in the live chat. We will try and get to those throughout the episode. Awesome episode upcoming here. We're going to be joined by Brendan Hartlove of the Maryland Terrapins, the voice of Maryland women's basketball after their big win over Michigan State yesterday. I have a pre-recorded interview with Mike Coon, the voice of Illinois women's basketball. They get a nice win Saturday over Oregon. They play here in less than an hour at 1 o'clock, so we talked with him yesterday. We'll have that conversation coming up as well. But as we do on most shows, at least when we start on a Tuesday, we will take a look at the AP Top 25, see what's going on around the Big Ten. This is where the teams have landed. Number one is still UCLA. The fourth-ranked Trojans stay put. Same with Maryland at number 8 and Ohio State at number 10. All of those teams stay in their respective positions. A little movement toward the bottom of the rankings. Michigan State drops 2 spots to number 21. Iowa's up a spot to number 23 after their wins this past week. And Michigan goes down a spot to number 24. They lost to the USC Trojans. They were without Silas Swords. We'll talk about that game coming up later in the show. Illinois and Nebraska still receiving votes. Nebraska did fall out of the top 25 over the past couple of weeks. They lost to UCLA over the weekend. So that's where we stand. 7 Big Ten teams ranked at the moment in the AP top 25. Some news and notes from around the Big Ten that we should hit on here to start. The only other thing we talked about last week, Caitlin Clark's jersey being retired. Washington will retire the number 10 jersey of Kelsey Plum. That's coming up on January 18th. So they're going to get one of the greats in women's basketball retired as well. Well, let's waste no time here for the Illini fans who might be watching us live or trying to listen quickly before their game starts here at 1 o'clock. They're hosting Washington. We had a chance yesterday to catch up with Mike Coon to chat about where Illinois is at in its season thus far. They're off to a really nice start. They battled some injuries, and they had a nice win over Oregon over the weekend. So let's hear from Mike Coon about his conversation, or let's hear that conversation I had with him yesterday. The transition into one of our guests here today. We are joined by the voice of the Illini Sports Network, Mike Coon. And Mike, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a interesting start to the season for Illinois. They're coming off this weekend of a win over Oregon, 64-59. I just kind of want you to kind of take a step back, look at the start to the season for the Illini. Some big wins early in the year, a couple of losses to really good teams. How do you kind of evaluate where Illinois is at right now?
Well, it started off very well. I mean, obviously the win over Florida State, a ranked team. Not often do you start the season with a ranked team at home, certainly, but that, kind of set the tone for the year. I think the game against Kentucky was closer than the score would indicate. I think it was 26-9, maybe in the fourth quarter, that Kentucky outscored Illinois. So we played okay there. Made a little comeback against Ohio State. It was making it a 9-point game. So, and we played some other teams. How good Southern Indiana was. Mm-hmm. And I think Illinois took care of them pretty good. We knew they were good coming in, and they were. And then, of course, the win over Oregon over the weekend sort of validated where we're at. 11-2 is not bad considering the schedule. And, we're looking forward to the bulk of the Big Ten schedule coming up.
Yeah, let's talk about that Oregon game a little bit. A 64-59 win for the Illini in a back-and-forth game kind of throughout. Neither team shot the ball all that well, but Mike, you got to find a way to win those games where you don't necessarily have it from the floor, and Illinois did that. How were they able to grind this one out?
Well, I think two things were really key. One, the combination of Peyton Scott, and Deja Kelly were combined 6 of 23 from the field. So I think Adelia McKenzie kind of leading the way defensively, but others as well. We were able to neutralize their guards, and that's certainly they play through them. And I think, secondly, getting to the free throw line. Illinois was 30 of 38 from the free throw line, made a couple big ones late, and that's sort of been their MO. Without, we've had some injuries throughout, especially with the guards, but I think we have a niche of really attacking the basket, getting some baskets that way, and Kendall Bostic can clean up the glass or get to the free throw line. Illinois, coming into that game, was 13th in the country in terms of free throws made. They've made well over 100 more free throws than their opponents, and so that was a big factor in the game.
Before we talk about some of the players that haven't been able to suit up here for Illinois with injuries, I want to talk about Kendall Bostic, because she just every year, I think she's one of the more slept-on players in the Big Ten, and her talent, an undersized forward who rebounds the ball better than almost anybody in the Big Ten. You could probably put Sarah Williams in that category as well. But just talk a little bit about what you've seen from her in terms of improvement in her final collegiate season.
Well, obviously, when she got here, she was known for her rebounding, right? I mean, she was the Big Ten leader or second in the Big Ten. She's really developed an offensive game. She's a leading scorer for Illinois at over 16 points a game. And I think one of the big things that she's added this year is her mid-range. I mean, from 15 to 17 feet, she may look like she's going to put her back to the basket, but she can turn and shoot. And if they don't come out to guard Kendall Bostic, she's going to hit that mid-range. And I think that's really helped her game offensively.
She had yet another double-double, 10 points and 10 rebounds in the win over Oregon. With Makaira Cook out, and obviously Gretchen Dolan had been out, she returned for the Oregon game. But with some of these guards out, who have you seen kind of step into those roles and take a step up in their games?
Well, the player that's got the start has been Jasmine Brown-Hager, transfer from Mississippi State. She's had a 22-point game. And so she has shared the point guard duties with Genesis Bryant. And that's meant that Genesis Bryant is playing 38 to 40 minutes a game, which she's certainly capable of. We were hoping to get away from that reality, which we had last year. But and then the other player that came back, unfortunately, she broke her hand in practice, is Barry Wallace, the McDonald's All-American. She's had a 20-point game as well. So we're starting to get, with Gretchen Dolan coming back in the Oregon game, still missing Makaira. But Barry Wallace and Jasmine Brown-Hager have been two really good additions to this team. And we're very fortunate with the injuries we've had. We've got two players that can really step up and not miss a beat.
Have you seen Shauna Green have to change anything up schematically with kind of the revolving door of who's been able to play, who hasn't for this Illini team?
The only thing has really been the depth. So it just meant players playing a lot of minutes. And beyond that, we've play primarily a man-to-man defense. I think we've got one of the better perimeter defenders in Adelia McKenzie. We've been fortunate to stay out of foul trouble for the most part. But I think from a schematic standpoint, it's the same Illinois team. It's obviously been different without Makaira. She and Genesis Bryant have had some amazing passes. In fact, one of them made from the Kentucky game, made the SportsCenter top 10 that Genesis Bryant had. So obviously we miss Makaira, but I think from a schematic standpoint, Shauna Green, she trusts her system, and that's what we've been going with.
When Illinois has been at its best this season, what's working for them? And when they have struggled, what have been kind of the Achilles heels?
Well, we were fortunate.
Apologies for that. We'll try and see if we can get the last part of that Mike Coon video to play. But Illinois is getting ready to take on Washington here at the top of the hour as they host the Huskies in the Washington kind of double. They played Northwestern over the weekend. We're going to talk about Washington coming up. A reminder, if you're joining us live, leave your comments in the live chat on the YouTube page. We'll try and get to those. Joseph Curry has already asked for final score predictions for IU UCLA this weekend. We will talk about that game coming up later in the show. I think it's the biggest game in the conference this weekend. Let's continue to roll on here in the show. Our team of the week, or our game of the week, as I just talked to Mike Coon, was Illinois knocking off Oregon 64-59. We mentioned in that conversation with him another double-double for Kendall Bostic, 10 points and 10 rebounds. That's her fifth straight double-double. Gretchen Dolan returning from injury was big. Had missed the previous 5 games. She scored 13 points, knocked down 3 3-pointers. Genesis Bryant is the one having to play a lot more minutes, as Mike just talked about, with Makaira Cook remaining out. Genesis Bryant, 23 points, 7 rebounds. She went to the free throw line 17 times, knocked down 16 of them, tied the program record for most made free throws in a game. This was back and forth the entire way. Wasn't like both teams were shooting the lights out by any means, but Illinois grinded out the win, and they get to their 5th straight victory, or I should say Genesis Bryant 5 straight in double figures. Illinois 11-2, 1-1 in the Big Ten. On the Oregon side of this matchup, Nani Falatia had 17 points, Deja Kelly 14, but they made her life difficult, 5 of 15 for the floor. Oregon as a team shot just under 31%. They're in action today as well at Northwestern. We'll talk about the schedule as we continue on here in our show. The team of the week is the Maryland Terrapins. And this is a team that's really playing some good basketball, but we've been wondering, would they get tested? And they got a big win over Michigan State over the weekend. In the second half, but they find a way to win. Just kind of talk about the flow of that game and how Maryland was able to pull it out.
Yeah, well, you bring up the fact that having Maryland face one of those top teams, and to be honest with you, through the first and second quarters, it didn't look like that was going to be the matchup. Michigan State really kind of struggled coming out of the gates, and again, it's that holiday layoff for everybody. You're working off some of the Thanksgiving, the Christmas ham and all the other stuff that's going on, and so I think that was something that Michigan State kind of struggled to get into the flow of the game a little bit. And we saw him jump to a lead that was as high as 17 at one point. And Sarah Myers, former Maryland guard, we're calling the game together. I'm like, is this gonna end up being a much bigger blowout than we kind of expected it to be? And for us as broadcasters, we were glad that it didn't, because it really got exciting there and in the fourth quarters. But I think the flow of the game started as both teams pretty rusty coming off that holiday break, and then they kind of found their groove a little bit. And Michigan State in the second half, they played like the number 19 team in the country, whereas they didn't as much in the first half. And so that was something that Maryland had to deal with. And I think that Maryland kind of sputtered there once Michigan State really got going. But then I think at the end of the day, the better team did come out on top.
It was Maryland's 12-0 start, the best start since 2018-19 for the Terps. They out-rebounded Michigan State, which means that Maryland has out-rebounded all 12 opponents so far this season. You and I talked about in the offseason that Brenda Frese went out to get rebounding. That was something she wanted, and that seems to, 12 games into the season, be coming to fruition.
Absolutely. I think two of the biggest transfer additions for Maryland are making that biggest difference. You have Sailor Poffenbarger, who had her 4th double-double of the season in that Michigan State game. You have Christine Dowsey, who I think had 10 boards before she even had a point on the day. I think her only points, if I'm not mistaken, came as a really crucial layup there towards the end. And so you have players that have come into this Maryland team, and that's one thing I know we were talking about before the season is there's a lot of new faces on this Maryland team. How long is it going to take them to gel? It didn't take that long. And I think you see some of those big key additions really making a difference on the glass, to where that rebound margin, I think going into that Michigan State game, was plus 17 for Maryland. I don't know what it is after that Michigan State game. But yeah, I think that's something that Brenda Frese is very glad to have, and kind of is aiding them in their kind of push to be undefeated right now.
12-0 start. They've out-rebounded everybody. This is my favorite stat I saw in the recap story, that Maryland is now, since quarters were started in 2015-16, Maryland is 240-3 when leading after 3 quarters. I mean, that's mind-bogglingly good. I mean, that is so many games that they just don't let slip away in the third quarter. And this was one of those that could have slipped away. Michigan State was making shots. I thought Theron Halleck played a terrific basketball game in this one. But ultimately, it's Maryland that finds a way to win. what is it about? I mean, there's probably not an answer to this, but what is it about Brenda Free's teams that find a way in the fourth quarter?
I think it's Brenda Freese, to be honest with you. I think when you have a coach that's that experienced in those late game situations that can kind of steady the ship a little bit, I think that really goes a long way. I had not seen that specific record. I knew it was probably pretty good just by the eye test over the years, but that is remarkable. And I think, Brenda has a lot to do with it because she does a really good job of either, and this is something that all good coaches need to have, but choosing the right moments to fire them up and kind of lay into them, or calm everybody down and say, we've been here, we've done that, we know what kind of team we are, and we can close this out. And so I think that once the game got tied against Michigan State, that was one of those we need to fire them up kind of moments. And then once they did restore that lead a little bit, it was, let's just see this out. I think you also have a lot of experienced players for Maryland over the years. There hasn't really year where it's been, they're very young, we don't really have any leadership on this team or anything like that. You have Shy Sellers, you bring in, Christina, see these players that are leaders on the team, and Shy Sellers is hyping the crowd up in the fourth quarter and everything. And, I just think that there is a lot of level heads on this team that can help them kind of close some of those tough situations out.
Kaila Smel has been a big addition from Rutgers this year for Maryland. How much have you seen her game open up other people's games, especially, I think, Cheyenne Sellers, taking some of the pressure off of her shoulders?
Yeah, I think that Shy's kind of been freed up to do a lot of different things. I think part of that is Smel. I think part of that is Sarah Tibiasu. So Shy Sellers is not kind of the main ball handler in Maryland. She can play off a little bit, what she likes to do. But you're right. Smel, she quietly had 19 points in that game. I don't know if you necessarily quietly have 19, but it got to the point in that third and fourth quarter where, Sailor Poffenbarger having a great game, Shy Sellers making all these things happen. We look down and Kaila Smel's well into double figures now. And I think she only made 1 3 in that game. She didn't make any, actually. They were all from, 2 points or the free throw line. That's not something we've become accustomed to with Kaila Smel. She's kind of a sharp shooter. So she showed different aspects to her game that she's not just relying on the three ball. She can make a lot of things happen. She was getting on the ends of great cut through the middle to kind of get some of those lay-ins. And I think that if you're Brenda Freese in the Maryland team, you like to see that because some players just don't have it for three. And she chucked up 10 and none of them went in. She only, I think, attempted 3. And so she kind of knows her game and knows how to adjust to the opposition. I think she's been a phenomenal player. She's one of the best shooters in the country right now. And I think that is something that Brenda Freese is very excited to have, another one of those transfer portal options.
The only stat you would circle and say maybe that's a bit red flaggish is the 25 turnovers. Was that more so because Michigan State plays a very aggressive defense? Was that more so you think the Spartans causing the turnovers? Has that been a continual issue for Maryland? Is that something we should keep our eyes on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is credit to Michigan State on that. There will certainly be ones that you can go back and circle from Maryland saying they're forced or careless or, attempted a pass that really didn't need to be attempted. But Michigan State's defense is very impressive. I mean, they play with a high pressure. They really do a good job of getting the hands up through lanes and stuff like that. It's just really tough to kind of play around. They threw some different looks at Maryland too. In the second half, they went to kind of a zone at some point, and I think it just really caused Maryland some problems. And so, I think in the third quarter, they had already surpassed their season average in turnovers. And so that was something that we were talking about a lot, just that Maryland wasn't necessarily perfectly clean with the ball. But again, a lot of that is up to Michigan State. They just were able to kind of rattle Maryland at times like that. So I think that's something that Michigan State can really hang their hat on. Sure, they had 2 straight losses to Alabama and Maryland, but come Big Ten play, they're going to really test some of those Big Ten offenses with what they're able to do. And so, 25, not great. And if you ask Brenda after the game, it's probably going to be one of the things that she brings up. But at the end of the day, you get a top 20 win, and you'll take it however you get it.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people will be dissimilar when they play Michigan State. They and Ohio State are teams that force a lot of turnovers. Rutgers at home, and then Iowa on the road this week for Maryland. It doesn't get a whole lot easier for the Terps as they head out to Carver Hawkeye Arena, and I think a pesky Rutgers squad as well. What's when Maryland's playing well? what can they bring into that Iowa game that's going to allow them to win on the road?
The big thing is confidence. Like you said at the top, they're undefeated. They're 12-0 for the first time in several years. And so I think that is something that they're doing good. There's a good vibe around this team. And like I was saying earlier, there's often a question of what that vibe is going to be when you have half a new team coming in the portal and a couple of the freshmen as well. And it feels like a Maryland team that's feeling themselves and really confident going into probably their toughest stretch of games, because right after those two you just mentioned, it's USC. And I think that it's not going to get any easier for Maryland anytime soon. But with the way they've played this season, they know that they can go up against anybody. And I was talking to Brenda Freeze before the game, and she was talking about how just anybody can beat anybody in this conference. And we say it year over year, but I think especially true this season with those additions to the Big Ten. And so, yeah, going into that Rutgers and Iowa game, and then USC, and then I think it's maybe Minnesota after that, or there might be one in the middle there. But it is a tough stretch. And so I think that coming off of this win, they showed that they can, bounce back from that Christmas break and really kind of do a job against the top 20 teams, so that when they do go on the road eventually to the Iowas and places like that, that they know what they're capable of. So I think it's confidence. They're shooting very well, I think, across the season so far. I think that they know they can rely on that. And like I said, they can kind of balance the offense. There were several players in double figures. So, yeah, if Kailin Smel isn't having her best day, you have a Shai Sellers, a Sailor Poffenbarger, Christine Kelsey. There are a lot of players. You have Bree McDaniel coming off the bench, which any Big Ten team, I'm sure, would love to have her in their starting lineup. And so I think that's something that Maryland has the personnel and the confidence to really kind of make a run here.
Well, we're excited to see it. That Iowa-Maryland game going to be one of the best this week in the Big Ten. Brendan, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it, and best of luck the rest of the season.
Thanks, Austin. Happy New Year.
Thanks again to Brendan for joining us. And those are the two close games in the Big Ten this weekend. There were a lot of lopsided results on what I thought would be a pretty fun weekend. And those two games certainly were fun. And if you're rooting for one of the teams that won in lopsided fashion, you had fun this weekend. But there were more lopsided results than I thought there would be. Let's kind of run through some of the results from this week. The number one team in the country certainly looked like it in the second half. They beat Nebraska 91-54. I mentioned second half because at the half, this was not necessarily out of reach. It was a 7-point lead for UCLA at the half. They outscored Nebraska 54-24 in the second half of this game after being up just 37-30 at half. Lauren Betts was back in the lineup for UCLA, 21 points, 8 rebounds. Kiki Rice, 18 points, 8 for 8 from the floor. She scored her 1,000th career point at UCLA. Tamia Gardner off the bench, 15 points, 6 boards, 56% shooting for UCLA in this game. They're now 13-0. Big congratulations to Corey Close. That's her 300th career win as the head coach of UCLA. Again, they are one of 5 undefeated teams in the Big Ten at 2-0 and one of 3 undefeated teams overall in the entire season. Them, Ohio State and Maryland. The number 4 ranked team in the country, USC, they cruised as well, 78-58 over Michigan. This was a Michigan team that was without Silas Swords. USC got 31 points from Juju Watkins. How about the stat line, though? 31 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks. That's pretty darn good for Juju. Kiki Iriafen, 18 points, 9 rebounds. She and Juju have now scored in double figures in every game this season. Rhea Marshall had 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. They forced 23 Michigan turnovers, and very similarly to UCLA, they pulled away in the second half, 44-27. Started the fourth quarter on a 12-2 run to grab the lead that they would not relinquish. They lost it early in the third quarter, got it back, went on that run, never looked back. Juju Watkins, 1,248 career points. She's 18th all time in scoring at USC, and she's still just midway through her second season. Again, no Silas Swords for Michigan, which obviously made things more difficult for the Wolverines. Jordan Hobbs had 19 points. Greta Kampschroeder is still playing some good basketball, 14 points, 3 of 5 from the three-point line. Olivia Olson with 11. They only got 5 bench points, though. And they did out-rebound USC, which is certainly something there, and they forced 18 USC turnovers. But I think just the firepower, especially without Silas Swords, eventually wore on Michigan. And going back to that Nebraska UCLA game for a second, something Nebraska is going to have to figure out. Obviously, they're playing without Natalie Potts for the rest of the year, but how do they get consistent scoring really from anybody right now? Even Alexis Markowski, who's definitely their best player, 3 points, 2 rebounds, 1 of 8 from the floor, shut down by Lauren Betts. And Lauren Betts is going to do that to a lot of people. But Amaya Hargrove off the bench at 12. That's the only player in double figures in that game for Nebraska. They're going to have to find a way to find some more consistent scoring. That is the issue right now, losing Natalie Potts to that season-ending injury. How about the player of the week? El Ladine of Washington, 40 points in a win in Evanston over Northwestern. It was 90-71 Washington. Here's some stats for you on El Ladine's performance. It tied the most points by a Big Ten player this season, most by a Husky since Amber Melgoza when she dropped 40 against Stanford back in 2018. It's the 4th most by a Washington Husky all time to score. She's the 4th one to do a 40-point game. Scored 26 points in the first half, which at that point had already surpassed her career high of 24 points, and that was a full game. The 26 came in just the first half. Again, Washington defeats Northwestern 90-71. Their first true road game in the Big Ten. They had hosted UCLA in their opener. They travel out to the Midwest. They knock off Northwestern. And again, coming up at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock, they are on the road at Illinois today. A couple other notes for Washington. Delia Daniels had a double-double with 20 and 15. Hannah Stiles added 10. They shot 51% from the floor, 42% from 3, 25 assists to just 10 turnovers. That assist number is a season best for Washington. Took their best on the road and knocked off Northwestern. So good performance from Washington in a win there. Freshman of the week is Tori McKinney of Minnesota, a career-high 25 points and another dominant win, this one for Minnesota over Penn State, 90-54. Again, that's a career high for Tori McKinney. And this Minnesota team, they are kind of in the same boat as Nebraska, but they had a little bit of experience last season playing without Mara Braun, and they're starting to figure it out. I mentioned McKinney with the 25. Amaya Battle had 17.6 rebounds, 7 assists. Annika Stewart, 15 points, 5 boards. They shot 41% from 3, 56% from the floor, scored 30 points off of 24 Penn State turnovers, and this was never a game. They jumped out to a 44-18 lead at the half. Minnesota has that capability of we've seen it just in their 2 Big Ten games. They're blown out on the road at Nebraska. They blow out Penn State at home. They have a lot of a high ceiling, a low floor kind of potential for Minnesota this season. There's not going to be off days in the Big Ten. Penn State had an off day, but I still think that's a solid team. But it was not a good performance for Penn State's stars in this game. Gabby Elliott was great with 19 points, but only one other player in double figures. Gracie Merkel did not score. 4 rebounds, no points, 0 for 1 from the floor. They didn't get a whole lot of Mariah Murray either. They were just 4 of 17 from the three-point line. I think that's right now the Achilles heel for Penn State. There's 2 of them. Turnovers and their lack of three-point threat outside of Mariah Murray is really hurting them, and they fall to Minnesota 90-54. Other game of note, Indiana crushed Wisconsin 83-52. It was a game for about a quarter or so, and then Indiana got up by 19 at the halftime and cruised the rest of the way. Lily Meister had a tying career-high 20 points, 9 of 13 from the floor. And I said last week on the episode when we were talking about this game, I was intrigued how Indiana's post would handle kind of their first dominant post matchup against Sarah Williams, and I thought they handled it really well, especially Lily. Shea Chesky with 14, Yarden Garzon with 13, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. She did leave the game with an injury in the fourth quarter. Hopefully she is okay. Hoosiers are going to need all hands on deck this weekend when they host UCLA. Sydney Parrish has come back from her injury and looked really good. She's averaging 12 points a game since returning. And from the three-point line before the injury, 3 of 25. Since the injury, 6 of 9. A totally different shooter. The shooter we've expected over the career of Sydney Parrish has come back here. Indiana shot 50% from 3 in that game. had a season best 25-8 assist to turnover ratio, allowed their season fewest points of 52, just 6 points in the second and third quarters. Indiana's 11th straight win over the Wisconsin Badgers. They've won 6 in a row now. And don't look now, but Terry Morin's got this team playing really well. I've been very impressed watching this team grow over the last month or so. They lost those back-to-back games to Harvard and Butler. Indiana was struggling to score. They were struggling to defend. Everything seemed off. And they go to the Bahamas. They get 2 nice wins. Their only loss in their last 10 games is a third game in 3 days to a good North Carolina team. Outside of that, they've really been dominant here over the last month or so. And you look at what they've done, and what Terry Morin's talked to me about is that they've taken advantage of this December. They played on the 7th against Penn State, and then they didn't play until the 15th, and then they didn't play until the 22nd, and then they didn't play until the 28th, and now they don't play until the 4th of January. So a lot of space and time for Indiana to be working on some stuff, and they really took that to heart, worked on themselves, and a lot of that's been on the defensive side of the floor, and it culminated in, I think, their best defensive play against Wisconsin. Sarah Williams in this game did get a double-double, 13 and 11, but life was difficult for her. 5 turnovers, just 6 of 13 from the floor. Carter McRae had life difficult as well, 5 of 12 for her, 10 points, 5 boards. Wisconsin turned it over 18 times and shot just 35%. Just impressed in the way that Indiana came out and played. And that we'll talk certainly about that game coming up with UCLA. But let's get to what I'm going to make a weekly tradition, which is our power rankings. Let's start, though, with the current standings in the Big Ten. This is where we sit. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see, if I get this off the screen here, you can see where we're at on the YouTube channel. If you're listening on podcast form, there are 5 undefeated teams in Big Ten play right now: UCLA, Ohio State, Maryland, USC, and Indiana. The Hoosiers, the only one of that group of 5 that's not ranked right now, not even receiving votes in the AP poll. Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan State, Illinois, Michigan, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Washington. A lot of good teams there at 1-1. Oregon, Penn State, Rutgers, Northwestern, and Purdue are all searching for their first wins of the season, starting 0-2 in conference play. So that leads us to our power rankings. Last week to this week, if you're watching us on YouTube, again, there's a visual there. Not much changing in my mind. I know Maryland got the big win over Michigan State. I'm not yet ready to put them above Ohio State. Ohio State didn't do anything to say they shouldn't be where they are. We didn't talk about Ohio State. They beat Rutgers on the road, 77-63, double-doubles for Cody McMahon and Asia Petty. They outscored Rutgers 23-9 in the second quarter to grab a 21-point lead at the break and cruised from there. So they didn't do anything to drop. Maryland certainly played well. I think you're kind of nitpicking at 3 and 4 there. I think there's just a little bit of a gap between 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4. And even when Michigan State played really well at Maryland, I still think there is a gap there from 4 to 5. And then you're looking at, I think, 6 through 8 are just a total coin flip. You could have convinced me to move Indiana up to 6. You could have convinced me to leave Iowa at 6. You could have convinced me to put Illinois at 6. I don't think there's a wrong answer there between 6 and 8. And then I think 9 was tough. 9, I think Nebraska, with the way they struggled at UCLA, I needed to put somebody else in that 9 spot. It was kind of between Nebraska, Michigan, Washington, kind of Oregon. I mean, some of those teams. Minnesota certainly deserves to be in that conversation as well. I would probably say it's Michigan 9, Minnesota close 10, Nebraska 11. Nebraska, I'm just a little bit worried about with their lack of offensive punch, the loss of Natalie Potts, and what that has done to this team. They just don't seem like the preseason team we thought they would be. So I thought it was only fair that somebody moved up into that 9. I know Michigan got blown out by USC as well, but that was a competitive game for 2.5 quarters without their second leading scorer. But it's not going to get any easier for Michigan. They're at UCLA coming up tomorrow, so certainly not anything easy for Michigan. But that's where we sit right now. Not a whole lot of changes in the top 9 of the power rankings. Well, let's look at our schedule for the week, and before we do that, we'll do our game of the week, which for me, and you can call me biased, whatever. I don't care. It's Indiana hosting UCLA. It's the first time we will see the Bruins taking a traditional Big Ten road trip. They obviously started the season at Washington. That's a nice win. It's a tough place to play. But this will be their first Midwest trip to a Big Ten, typical Big Ten location as they go to Bloomington and then to West Lafayette. So I think this is a really big spot for Indiana and for UCLA. Obviously, Indiana is a team that's won 6 straight games. They've won 9 of their last 10, but this would just be a real program-defining win for Indiana to prove that they are still one of those teams. They obviously were a 1 seed and Big Ten champs 2 seasons ago. They've been a host school the past couple of years in the NCAA tournament, Sweet 16 a year ago, and they were very close to knocking off South Carolina in that Sweet 16 game last season. But you lose Mackenzie Holmes, you lose Sarah Scalia. It is a bit of a retool. It's certainly not a rebuild, but it's a retool. And this is an opportunity on your home floor on a Saturday. I would imagine Assembly Hall is going to be on fire for this game. And UCLA, kind of their first true road test, not on the West Coast. They're going to come across the country. They're going to play Indiana on a Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's also something to keep in mind here. Body clock watch with this game being a noon Eastern start. That's early for a West Coast team. So can Indiana take advantage of that as well? That's another variable in this game. And I just think Indiana's playing some really good basketball right now. All you have to do is just kind of sit and watch the past couple of games. I think the Wisconsin game was 40 minutes of just pure, really good basketball by Indiana. The ball movement's great. The last 3 games, they've had 27, 27, and 25 on assists. Turnovers have been down. Assists have been up. Shooting percentage continues to go up. They're knocking down 3-pointers, especially at home. I think the recipe to beat a team is good defense and good shooting. And Indiana can have that at its best. Have they always had that this season? No. But can they have that at their best? Absolutely. Obviously, Lily Meister and Caroline Strickland will be tested with Lauren Betts. Indiana's going to have to double a lot. They're going to have to dig. And obviously, there's a lot less people you can dig off of on UCLA than there are Wisconsin with the Sarah Williams matchup. There's a lot more shooters that can hurt you on the outside for UCLA. Is this an uphill battle for Indiana? Absolutely. But I'm very intrigued with how Indiana game plans for this one, how they defend Lauren Betts, Kiki Rice, all of that. I'm not going to give any score predictions as one of the people who will be on the broadcast for this, but I am fired up for Hoosier fans watching this. Let's pack that place. It's going to be awesome. Assembly Hall should be rocking on Saturday afternoon. Again, noon on Fox. I'll obviously have the radio call as Indiana hosts the number 1 team in the country, UCLA. Awesome game coming up on this Saturday afternoon. Plenty more games coming up this week as well. Today's schedule, 3 games, including at the top of the hour. Washington is at Illinois. A couple of teams trying to prove that they belong in the top half of the Big Ten Conference. That'd be a really, really nice road win for Washington. Oregon is at Northwestern. Oregon trying to get 1 of 2 on their trip to the Lincoln State. They lost to Illinois over the weekend. That's at 3 o'clock today. Minnesota at Wisconsin at 4:30. A couple of teams also trying to vie for the middle of the Big Ten and the upper half of the Big Ten. Wisconsin, I think, has to be a little disappointed in the way they played at Assembly Hall. See if they come back with some fire on New Year's Eve here today. Tomorrow, a nice schedule of games. Iowa's on the road at Penn State as the Lady Lions look for their first win. Same for Purdue on the road at Michigan State. That's at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Nebraska at number 4 USC is at 3 o'clock. And number 24 Michigan on the road at number 1 UCLA at 5 o'clock. A lot of those games, those latter 2, on the Big Ten Network. Thursday and Saturday, there's 1 game on Thursday. Rutgers is on the road at Maryland. I think Rutgers has the toughest schedule this week. You put them and probably UCLA in the conversation. Rutgers plays at number 8 Maryland and then hosting number 4 USC. So definitely the toughest schedule of the week belongs to Rutgers. They start at number 8 Maryland Thursday night. Saturday, we mentioned the UCLA-Indiana game at noon. 3:30, Wisconsin is up in the Pacific Northwest to take on Oregon. And then on Sunday, a full slate, 5 games of Big Ten women's basketball. Northwestern is at number 10 Ohio State. Penn State is at Nebraska. Illinois at Minnesota. Number 8 Maryland is at number 23 Iowa. That's the kind of the secondary game of the week for me. I think that's a really, really good one there. 6 o'clock Sunday night on BTN. And number 4 USC travels all the way across the country to take on Rutgers, 8 o'clock Sunday night on the Big Ten Network. So again, I would say Indiana and UCLA is my game of the week. You can't overlook Maryland at Iowa, though, in Carver Hawkeye Arena, another place that will be on fire for that game. You know it on Sunday. That game's going to be awesome. I would say a third one I'd throw in there is today's game, Washington at Illinois. I'm very intrigued by that one. And I'm also intrigued by Sunday's game of Illinois at Minnesota. Where did go? Big week for the Gophers, because if you want to prove that you're a top half team of the Big Ten, you go on the road to Wisconsin, you host Illinois. Those are 2 very winnable games against other teams that are vying for the same type of spots in the Big Ten as you. Big week for Minnesota and a big week for Illinois, hosting Washington and going to Minnesota. So kind of on both ends of the spectrum there for those 2 sides. Very excited to see how they do that. A couple of notable accomplishments we should note before we leave. Kendall Bostic, her 43rd double-double of her career. That's second in Illini history, 10 behind the record. She's also 78 rebounds behind first place in career boards for Illini. Chloe Moore McNeil is 5th now at IU with 416 career assists. We mentioned the Juju Watkins, 18th on the scoring list for USC, and Corey Close, 300th career win at UCLA. So fun stuff going on all around the country. A lot of great performances this week, but El Ladin's 40 points stood out the most. Double-double for Cody McMahon, the win over Rutgers. Destiny Adams, 31-17 in the loss to Ohio State. Lauren Betts' return with 21-8 over Nebraska. Kiki Rice had 18 points and went 8 for 8 from the floor. Juju Watkins with that 31-point game against Michigan. And Delia Daniels for Washington, overshadowed by her teammates' 40-point game. Daniels had 20 points and 15 rebounds in the win over Northwestern. It is going to be an awesome week here in the Big Ten. A lot of great games. I'm excited to be in Simon Scott Assembly Hall for the game on Sunday when the Hoosiers host the Bruins. It's going to be fun to see if Indiana's ready to try and shock the world and give the Bruins their first loss of this season. We'll be back next Tuesday. It's our final show of 2024 today. Happy New Year to everybody out there, whether you're listening live with us on YouTube or in podcast form. A reminder, all our videos are uploaded to the Back Home Network YouTube channel. If you want to watch us in video form and aren't able to join us live at noon every Tuesday right here with the Back Home Network YouTube channel. And for those of you watching on video and maybe you want audio form, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Enjoy your New Year's festivities. Hopefully involve some basketball watching. Happy New Year. Have a great night. We'll talk to you guys next Tuesday here on the Dribble Drive podcast.